Okay, welcome to this tutorial on if-else statements. If-else statements are pretty easy to understand. Basically, you're going to tell the Arduino that if something is true, do this. You can also have the option to tell the Arduino that if it's not true, do this other thing. So do this if it's true, otherwise do this. So if we look at the code here, we can see if this comparison is true, do this, otherwise, or in Arduino speak, else, do this thing. So the way we make comparisons in Arduino is to use the same math symbols as we use in math. So there's equal to right here. Notice that there's two equal signs to represent equal to. If you only use one equal sign, you're telling the Arduino that something is equal to something. If you use two equal signs, you're asking the Arduino, does this equal this? The next symbol is it less than or equal to? Is it less than? Is it greater than or equal to? Is it greater than? And this one you might not be familiar with, and that's not equal to. So that's an exclamation point with an equal sign after it, and that means it's not equal to. For instance, 2 is not equal to 1. So if we look at this very basically, we might ask the Arduino, if 1 is greater than 2, do this thing. In this case, 1 is not greater than 2, so the Arduino would not do this thing and would move on to the next line of code down here. Okay, so let's take a look at this in practice. I've set up that same if statement as we had in the previous slide, and here we can see we're asking the Arduino if 1 is greater than 2, digital write 13 high. Now I think we can all guess what's going to happen. I'm going to hit start simulation, and in fact, nothing happens. We go to pin 13, nothing happens. It stays off. But if we were to change this so that this was 3, now we know 3 is greater than 2, and we hit start simulation, this time we can see that pin number 13 lights up. So some of the other comparators or comparisons that we can do is it greater than or equal to? I think we understand that one. So let's move on to something like does not equal to, because that might be a little bit new to some people. So we can say if 2 does not equal to, then turn on pin 13. So we can see 2 equals 2, so we would expect for the pin not to light up. Let's see. And in fact, pin 13 does not light up. But if we change this to a 4 or any other number but not a 2, when we hit start simulation, we can see that pin 13 does light up. So before we go on to the next part of the tutorial, I just want to talk a little bit about digital read, which we haven't talked about yet. Digital read is the opposite of digital write. Essentially, rather than telling a pin to be either high or low, the Arduino will be looking at a pin to determine whether or not it's high or low. So when you see it written, you're going to see digital read and then a bracket. You're going to fill in which pin you want the Arduino to look at, and then you're going to close the bracket. So here we have digital read, bracket, pin 1. So that means the Arduino is going to go look at what's happening at pin 1, and in the place that you've written digital read, it's going to return that value. So it'll replace the word or the value of digital read 1 with either high or low. And you'll see that coming up in the next code. So with our newfound knowledge of digital read, let's take a look at how it can be used with an if statement. So we can start by writing if digital read A4 equals high, then we need to do something. And let's do the same thing as we were doing before. We will digital write pin number 13 high. Make sure we close the brackets. So when we look at this now, we see that we have our digital read. And what's going to happen is that the digital read is going to go look at pin A4 and see whether or not it's high or low. It's then going to replace itself with either the value of high or low. So it's going to look, and it's either going to replace itself with a value so that the if statement looks like this, or so that the if statement looks like this. Now, we won't see a change, but the Arduino will. So when we look at it in practice, we're going to start the simulation. Now, the Arduino is going to be looping through our void loop. It's going to be asking digital read A4, so it's going to be looking at digital read A4. And right now, it's reading digital read A4 as low, and it's replacing this with low. So this if statement could be written, or it can be interpreted as if low equals high, digital write 13 high. Now, obviously, that's not true, so the Arduino is not doing that. As soon as we press this button, though, that digital read A4 is going to switch. It's going to become a high, and then the if statement is going to read if high equals high, digital write 13 high. in which case the Arduino will turn on pin 13. So let's take a look. I'm going to press on button A4 down here, and as we can see, pin 13 did light up. We're also not limited to making one statement in here. We can use other things such as AND, which is 2 ampersands, or, which is 2 straight up and down lines. That's usually found just above the return key on the right of the keyboard, just above the backward slash. So if we use digital read A4 equals high and 1 is less than 2, then we can hit start. And now it's going to be looking for both of these statements to be true. So right now 1 is less than 2. The Arduino has confirmed this, but it does not see that A4 equals high. It waits until A4 is pressed. Once A4 becomes high, we can see up here that pin 13 turns on. So if we were to change this 1 to a 3, now the Arduino is still looking to see if both of these statements are true, but when we start the simulation, it's going to be asking, is digital read A4 high, and is 3 less than 2? So even though we're pressing pressing pin 4, and the Arduino is seeing that pin 4 is high, no matter what we do, because 3 is never going to be less than 2, the digital write 13 high is never going to happen. Now if we were to switch this to an OR, here we're now asking, is digital read A4 high, or is 3 less than 2? So in this situation, when we hit start simulation, we're seeing that 3 is not less than 2, but A4 might be high. So when we press it, now we're seeing that digital read A4 is high, or 3 is less than 2. Well, this one was fulfilled, so we don't have to worry about this one. On the other hand, if we make this a 1 again, and we start the simulation, the Arduino immediately sees that 1 is less than 2, so it immediately turns on pin 13, because we're asking, is either of these true? Now, let's get rid of this OR statement and return to just a basic one question if statement. Now, if digital read A4 is high, digital write pin 13 high. What if we want to do something if this isn't true? In this case, we're going to use an else statement. So if digital read A4 is high, digital write pin 13 high. Otherwise, digital write 13 low. Now the Arduino is asking, is digital read A4 high? If it is, I'm going to digital write pin 13 high. If not, I'm going to digital write pin 13 low. When we start the simulation, make sure that you remember to close all your brackets. So this else statement, I hadn't closed the bracket, so it was using the bracket from the void loop. We were missing a bracket basically. So let's start the simulation. Now we're waiting for, or the Arduino is waiting for this button to be pressed. When it's pressed, it writes 13 high. When it sees it's not pressed, it writes 13 low. So if digital read A4 high, digital write 13 high, otherwise digital write 13 low. So that pretty much sums up if statements for the Arduino. The important things to remember are that if something is true, do the things inside the brackets, otherwise do the things inside these brackets. You don't always need to include else, but you can if it makes your code easier or simpler. Another important thing to remember that will save you lots of time is that you need to use 2 equal signs if you're asking the question. So if you're asking, does digital read A4 equal high, then you need to use these 2 equal signs. I hope this tutorial has been useful. Please leave me any comments on ways that I could change it or make it more clear, or if you have any questions.